Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March 16th, 2021 iteration of the SIG Windows Kubernetes community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to all of the CNCF's code of conduct. All right, let's get started. Let's open this up to kind of some introductions. If there's anybody who's new on the call who wants to kind of introduce themselves and ask any questions. I see a couple of new people on the call today, but no obligations to do so.
Hey, I'm Hayden Barnes. I'm a new engineering manager at Rancher, working in the Windows container space. I've been following the Windows SIG notes, but this is the first meeting I've actually had an opportunity to join. I'm really excited to get more involved in the SIG and have some chats with you and members here and see what I can do to help out.
Awesome, great.
Hayden wrote the book on WSL too, I think, right, Hayden?
Yes, please buy it. Please pre-order it now.
Yeah, cool. It's awesome to have you here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. No, so what I wanted to do was take my skills with kind of Windows and Linux interoperability and get more involved in the cloud native Kubernetes space. And this opportunity opened up at Rancher, and I'm super excited about it. And we're building out a team, and we've got some cool ideas. And yeah, we'll take it from here.
All right, that actually might be a good opportunity to discuss kind of what the topic that Jay was added last week, but we got delayed, so it might be a good meeting for you to have here. Is there anybody else? If not, we can go through, I can just quickly go through a couple of introduce the leads since there is a bunch of new folks here again. Yep, I'll do that. I'm Mark. I'm an engineer in Azure at Microsoft, and I'm currently the co-chair of SIG Windows. James or Jay, do you want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Sure, I'm Jay and work with Mark and James on some stuff. Currently focusing a lot on Antria, CNI, Windows network policy type stuff, and the overall cluster API kind of user experience.
James, I work with Mark at Microsoft and been focused a lot on the upstream tests in the last couple weeks.
Yep. All right. Cool. Thanks. Unless anybody else wants to introduce themselves, we can go on. In terms of announcements, I don't think that there's any big ones. I believe that test freeze is the 24th. I'll have to double check that, but that might be an important date for folks here.
Oh, wait, did you just start the recording, Mark?
Yeah, it's recording to the cloud.
Okay, I forgot. Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah, okay, I double checked. It says it's recording to the cloud.
Oh yeah, it does. Never mind. Yeah.
Okay. I believe it's the 24th. I need to double check on that. So we've passed code freeze at this point. There is a documentation or a deadline today to have documentation open up or PRs open up, but I believe that only applies to new or advancing features where they like to see placeholders. They don't need to be complete yet, but they want to know who's going to be responsible for opening up the pull requests for the documentation updates so that they can ping people if they need to. Does anybody else have any announcements at this point? I think we're getting kind of late in the release cycle, so there's not a whole lot of kind of important dates left here. All right, I don't see anything here. So Jay, do you want to kind of drive this conversation that you've been posting or that you posted last week that we kind of ran out of time for, but.
So sorry for disturbing. Yeah, I just have a question regarding any pending PRs. So I have one PR which was stuck because of the milestone, the 1.1 milestone. So what's the process look like? Yeah, going after that, when does it open, and do I need to do any manual intervention?
Is it if it's labeled SIG window, if it has the label SIG Windows on it, we should pick that up when we do the backlog refinement. That depends on how the PR was labeled. Do you know if it was a feature or if it was labeled as a feature or a bug? If it was labeled as a bug, there's still a chance to get it into the 121 release. But if it's labeled as a feature, then it's probably going to have to wait or wait until 122 opens up. And for that process, it's usually pretty early in the milestone or in that release. The either release team or members of SIG release will kind of declare or send a mail to the Kubernetes dev alias when they're allowing those new PRs in. But for the last couple of releases, they've been trying to change things up a little bit, so there hasn't really been a consistent process for that. But either in 120 or 121, they had kind of a phased approach where certain like bugs and test fixes were allowed to go in before any kind of new just code was allowed to go in. But that'll all be widely communicated through the Kubernetes dev alias.
So it's actually marked as a bug. So I added it on the day when the freeze started. But the issue is, yeah, it requires adding a milestone label on it. And when I tried to do so, it mentioned, yeah, only the release management group is the one allowed to add the milestone 1.1 label.
Okay, in that case, could you either post it in Slack, and my apologies if you already did. I haven't been on Slack. I was out of office yesterday.
No, I haven't. I can definitely post it there.
The chairs and tech leads can add milestones to it, so we'll take a look, and if it meets the bar, we could try and get that in for this for 121 if it is a bug fix.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I think last time, Mark, you talked about the KubeCon CFP open until April 11th. I know a couple of folks are working on a couple of proposals. Just a reminder that we need to submit anything, any interesting sessions about SIG Windows before.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so the KubeCon North America CFP is open. There's a link in, I'll just move that up too. If anybody's interested in submitting a talk, there's a link there, and there's also all of the dates for when KubeCon North America is scheduled. I also believe that it's still, if anybody's interested in attending KubeCon EU virtual, you can purchase tickets for up until pretty close to when KubeCon EU virtual is, which is the first week of May. So if anybody's interested in joining that, that might be a good opportunity.
Yeah, and also if there is any topic that you don't want to present, but you want anyone from like SIG Windows team, like Mark, James, or like someone from Microsoft to present, also let us know so we can consider it like something you want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're always open to taking kind of advice and either figuring out. So each KubeCon, each SIG gets, it used to be 2, now it's down to 1 maintainer track talk that we can. If there's enough kind of appetite from the community to deep dive into different issues, we can go into that. For this year's KubeCon EU virtual, we're doing a deep dive into networking with David Schott and Kalia. So that's always an option too.
Yep. One more thing, Mark. I don't know if it's too early, but usually at the end of the the last release cycle, we start talking about the next release, like 122, and the major items committed. And if the whole SIG Windows is on page on like the priority, do you want to do that today or maybe someday later?
Let's do that a little bit later.
Okay.
Because I do want to give Jay the floor to kind of discuss this.
Sounds good.
Just kind of restructuring SIG Windows and kind of dedicating ourselves to like focus areas.
Yeah, so it's an open conversation, but I guess the only real thing here was I was just thinking, well, our old groups, we don't use them anymore, and I think the real goal to cut all the sort of like bike shedding out of the whole thing. And like what the real goal here is, let's get everyone engaged. Let's give people areas they can own, make mistakes, try stuff, become leaders, you know, and like that's the goal. So my thinking was, let's get rid of these old groups that we're not really using, and maybe some people would want to step up and really help to coordinate some of these sub areas. Might allow us to scale this whole Windows thing, so that we can keep up with all the work that we have, because a lot of us are super busy with things, and so we don't have as much bandwidth to track every little thing that's going on. But maybe if we had focus areas, we could make a bigger impact without having to do more work. That's kind of my thought. So it's kind of a two-part conversation. The names of the groups to me are arbitrary. The thing that's really interesting to me is who's interested in really stepping up and leading one of these, and sort of owning the overall sort of interlock with the broader SIG, if we make new groups, right? And I think we were talking, some people expressed some interest, sort of, it seemed like this, I think Arvind was maybe interested in some of them, and I'm interested, of course, in the networking side, and I don't know, we got other people who've come on board. There's community work to do, there's test grid stuff to do, so
Yeah, so I think we
can anything specific, I guess would be the starting point, but yeah, go on, Mark.
I was gonna say we can go through what some of these were. It's a little bit strange, like that these are actually the GitHub repositories that we own, and they don't necessarily tie directly to different sub projects. But we can certainly add some clarification or everything here, and set up new GitHub kind of repos under Kubernetes SIGs as we see necessary.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that was one thing that I was confused about. So these aren't actual sub projects. Okay.
So I think that some of them were sub projects, and some of them are misleading. I can go over some of these real quick and give kind of what I remember from history here. A lot of these are set up by users, like by people who are no longer part of the community. So the Windows GMSA, that was a sub project to support group managed service accounts in for Windows workloads. There were two kind of big enhancements around this. One was GMSA itself, and another one was the adding the run as username, kind of analogs to run as user for Windows workloads. I believe that right now this is mostly a repository. I don't know why that links to the owner's file with some documentation and also some like an admission webhook that's used as kind of a sample for configuring group managed service account functionality in Windows. This is linked to from some of the official documentation in the Kubernetes website. So this is something that I don't think we want to shut down, but we can definitely either wind down or kind of, say this is in maintenance mode here.
I would definitely say we need to keep it around. There is some work that needs to be done. Some of the pod specs need to be migrated to the latest versions and the webhooks and that kind of stuff from a maintenance perspective. But for the most part, it's pretty stable at this point. So I don't know if there's anybody that wants to step up and take on some of that work. It would be a good first thing to get involved in, and pretty scoped.
So we are scaling up over here on the VMware side, and we have a new engineer in China. Her name's Wenli, and she is testing out the GMSA stuff as we speak. Para has been training her on some stuff recently, and so she's just starting to get involved. She's in the Asia time zone though, so she may not be able to show up to these SIG Windows meetings as much, but I'll ping her about this today. She's really interested in this stuff, which is kind of cool because I don't know a lot of people that are really interested in GMSA, but she is. So yeah,
that's good. Yeah, and we do have some tests for GMSA too that can also help kind of serve as
she's running those as well. She's starting to run those as well.
I just
that would be
a couple fixes for those tests, so they should be getting merged or promoted pretty soon, just FYI.
So the next is Windows samples. I actually don't know too much of the history of this one. You can take a look. I think that this was meant to be more or less kind of, okay, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot here. Looks like Patrick has something. I think this was meant to be kind of just like a collection of kind of more interesting deployments that utilize either Windows workers themselves or Windows and Linux workloads here. This is definitely, I think, an opportunity that anybody can kind of contribute to this and make this better. I think that things have kind of stabilized now, but I know kind of early on when Windows workloads GA'd, there was tons and tons of questions about, can clusters even support Windows and Linux nodes in the same cluster? How do I deploy things and target Windows nodes specifically? How do I do all of that stuff? And I think this was an attempt to kind of demo some of that functionality. Yeah, I see that this has got some Linux workloads in there, and I'm guessing some Windows workloads in there too. So this, I think we could maybe talk about later, because the other two are, I think, more interesting. So Windows testing is where SIG Windows has all of their, or most of the test content. So the kind of definitions that actually drive the prow jobs live in the Kubernetes test infra repository. But Windows testing has a lot of things like the cluster definitions for setting up those clusters, at least on Azure and GCE. It's got a lot of content about test images, which used to be built entirely kind of manually and uploaded to an ETE team's Docker hub. Now that's being largely built out of the same Kubernetes test infrastructure that the Linux test jobs do and everything, but we do maintain some of these repo lists. This is probably the most active sub-project, I would guess, today. I know a lot of folks who are interested in testing kind of contribute and keep this up to date. There probably are some opportunities to clean this up. I don't know if we still need to have all of these. So these are all of the different test images that are used or potentially used by the EDE tests here. I believe most of these are now just being built as with their analogs in Windows or in Linux. So we could probably go and either start deleting some of these.
I was planning to do a cleanup here and remove a lot of them. A lot of those images have been centralized into the agnost image. So they are no longer relevant because the last time they were being used was Kubernetes 1.15, 1.16 or something like that. So they're definitely not relevant anymore. There might be a few images that might be interesting for other than E3 conformance tests. I'll have to take a look, but I'll look at this week.
Sounds good. And then we also do have documentation for how to build and run the EDE tests on, run them against nodes with Windows or like Windows nodes in a cluster. I believe that this is fairly up to date. I know I've made a couple of updates. Jay's done a lot of work to update this recently. So this is a good guide, but anybody is more than welcome to open up a PR or an issue if they have any kind of questions about these documents or this documentation here. So folks can kind of just look at that as they have time. Now, SIG Windows tools, this one is interesting because my understanding with this was initially this was used to host kind of some of the scripts and workflows and deployment files that were being used to test kubeadm support on Windows. So in 1.16 maybe, some folks who I don't believe are on the call, Ben Moss and Gob from VMware, we're working on getting kubeadm support for Windows. And this relied quite heavily on wins.exe. And there's a lot of kind of scripts around setting all of that up. This repository, or I think the kubeadm support, they declared it as either alpha or beta and then stopped. And the reason is that they were hoping to hold this as to kind of not progress this feature to declare it stable until both cluster API had kind of full support for Windows nodes, and also that the Windows workers had Windows had privileged containers, so that we could not need to have kind of the kind of official deployment scenarios deploy wins just for a variety of reasons, mainly kind of security oriented reasons for this. I'm at least considering this still to be kind of in a holding pattern here. I know the Windows privileged container support that we were hoping to have go alpha for 121 has been delayed until 122. But all indications are that we can get that merged pretty early in the 122 code base. James, I know you've also been dealing or like looking at issues and making some fixes in the SIG Windows tools repository. Do you want to comment on anything here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, once we have privileged containers, a lot of this can go away, and some of the work there. So I think we maybe need to form a team to do all the various work to get the YAML files into the right places. So like getting kubeproxy baked into where the Linux one is, so that Windows works. Getting the YAML files defined out for all the other CNIs. So once we have privileged containers, we'd like to have the other CNIs bring on support for those instead of going through kind of these custom scripts. They'd each individual CNI would maybe support those themselves. And so we need somebody to kind of take that on and get it working. So it's pretty fun, exciting stuff. So
yeah, as James mentioned, so part of what's also in this repository is the deployment file that will deploy either kubeproxy or I believe Flannel via a daemon set on Windows. And eventually, I think the end goal should be to not need a separate repository to host those. We should just try and get the kind of the official or the standard kubeproxy and CNI deployments to just check and see, hey, other Windows nodes, here's what the daemon set should look like for in that case instead.
So when you say that, that's kind of a tricky that's kind of a tricky problem. I mean, when you say you want the kubeproxy to be, are you talking about actually building a kubeproxy deployment YAML that like is like a default for kubeadm that is like runs like an AGN host type kubeproxy thing that runs in a privileged environment? Or are you talking about it's running two different pods that are deployed differently?
I think it's more the former, especially for some of the CNI deployments. Like a lot of the documentation on how to deploy a CNI is you set up your Linux node, you get the kubelet running, and then you deploy a daemon set from that. And the daemon set's like under the core OS repository for Flannel. But then the documentation for, or at least the guidance for Windows is after you do that, you go and you deploy this deployment out of the SIG Windows tools repository. It'd be great if it was just, go and you deploy the one Flannel deployment and it will cover Linux and Windows nodes.
So a little advertising sales pitch here. We are doing SIG Windows after hours and we're going to look at this in gory detail. So everybody please hang out in 3 minutes when this call is over or whatever, or 30 minutes. Okay, yeah, go on.
For kubeproxy, I know like there's many different ways of deploying kubeproxy. We could have it so that It is more of, if you're using KubeADM or Cluster API, it will go and get a baseline set up for the, for just like a privilege daemon set that gets deployed to the nodes. That would be good.
Need somebody to go figure all that out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so do we want to keep these? So the question to maybe up level a little is, we have all these things. The question is anybody, I guess, interested in either any? So Mark showed basically that we've got these 4 repos, really 5 repos that sort of map over to these sort of subdomains or sub projects. And would anybody be interested in helping to own the story around how we converge these utilities into new projects, or maybe take one of them as is and improve it, or anything?
Or suggest a completely new one.
Yeah.
The other one that I'll call out briefly here, and I'm actually not sure why it's not mentioned here, is SIG Windows and SIG Storage kind of co-own this CSI proxy, which is another project to allow out of tree CSI plugins to run on Windows nodes, which don't have privileged containers. That is something else that we should get added here too. And I know Jing, who's on the call, is very active there, along with Deep and Kaya and a few other folks. But yeah, exactly what Jay said. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for anybody who's interested to kind of take the reins on some of these and give them some of the love that they haven't had in some of the recent milestones.
Yeah, and a lot of us who've been doing this stuff for a while, we can help. Like, we're not, you do not have to be like a Windows expert or a Kubernetes expert even. It's more owning the logistics of how we grow this community around these various things that are valuable that we curate, right? So there's definitely a lot of deep technical work here, but a lot of the work is helping organize things and helping us make sure that we're doing things and moving forward, you know. So
yeah, I don't mind helping out with this stuff. Again, I don't know where to start, but I think one thing we should maybe try and do is sort of prioritize these items so that we can sort of tackle the low-hanging fruit first, or tackle something that we really need to get done in the short term. But I can see how we can help. We're also trying to grow our team within Red Hat, so I can see if I can pull in more people.
What do you think would be the best way to dive into some of these, Arvind or Jay? Should we just kind of make one thread on Slack and SIG Windows for each one of these and start talking on there? Should we devote some time to each one of the next couple community meetings to going deeper into any one of these? I'm open to suggestions and kind of whatever folks on this call want.
I don't know about Jay's thoughts. My suggestion would be is to devote some time during like 10 minutes just to kick things off during a community call, and then start following up on Slack to see what comes out of it. That would be my.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for Slack. I feel like though what we need is we need owners, right? We need people to say, I'm interested in this topic and I want to own it. I feel like we do a lot in Slack. So I feel like not to do that. Like we should definitely keep using Slack, because that's like but I mean, I think I was hoping we could kind of like get some people to say like, hey, this is something that I care about, right? But maybe that won't happen today. Maybe we start in Slack, but that would be the goal that I care about the most. I may be outvoted on that. I know that's kind of different than the typical asynchronous email Slack thing that we tend to do. But
yeah, another option is we could kind of try and kick things off on Slack and schedule like kind of out of band meetings, especially for like the GMSA one, Jay, where you mentioned there's people that might not be able to make this meeting at their normal time. We could say, hey, we're looking for people who are interested in kind of taking ownership and curating this. We're more than they're more than happy to help get them started. Should we set up a meeting at a time that works for more folks to kind of focus on that?
Yeah, I was also thinking the same thing, Mark. I'm interested in some of the areas, but getting started is hard. So if we schedule like kind of a hackathon where like there are experts there, like, you know, if I need to set up my dev machine or whatever, like for that area, getting started, then also like what owning it means or what it entails, what time commitment we're looking for. I think those questions, if we answer them and get people started, there would be more of a like easier path to commitment.
So we have a hackathon every week, Muzz, just so you know, it's happening and like starts right after this meeting.
Oh,
And
really? Okay, I didn't know.
Sure. Yeah. So
And actually, I'm going to drop for the SIG node call now, so that's a good segue into the after hours meeting.
okay, yeah, let's start hacking on stuff. All right, cool.
All right, I'm going to stop this recording so that we have a clean cut for uploading the community meeting.
So
Take it away, Jay.
cool. Muzz, are you gonna do you have some time to hang out? And of
Yeah.
course everyone else,
Yep.
whoever else. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so the official